We've fallen behind on our mushroom updates with Ms. Lori Daybell wrapping up her circuits. So we're going to jump back a few days because they have wrapped up Erin Patterson's testimony. But we're going to take a few steps back down in old Australia to Erin and Annette Rogers going back and forth on the stand in today's video.
Hey, 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 welcome to the Sofa Squad. Sipping from the cup, hey, hey.
Now hold on everybody, let's do a quick sofa sidebar now. Keep in mind, ain't no cop, ain't no doctor, ain't no lawyer, ain't no therapist, ain't none of that fancy credentialed stuff, okay? Only credentials we got up in here is my sass, and this sofa. Now keep in mind also, I'm just giving my opinions on very public information, so do your own research, come to your own opinions, and drop them off in the comment section. And while you're down there, if you do like what you see here at the Sofa Squad, drop a little like, drop a little comment, drop a little share. It helps the channel out immensely. Now let's get to dishing. Hello Sofa Squad and welcome back to the sofa. This is a sofa, and this is a Paul. My name's Paul if you're new to the channel, and if you're not new to the channel, well guess what? My name's still Paul. Now what we're gonna be doing today, like I said, is we're going to be continuing on the mushroom trial, and we're going to be talking about more of Erin Patterson's testimony and her back and forth with Annette Rogers. So let's start off with Annette Rogers coming in hot, okay, with some questions about the beef Wellington recipe. Now she suggested, which will say a lot to Erin, that her previous statement of not being able to find a whole large filet wasn't true. Remember, she was like, oh, I couldn't find this, so I got all these other little ones or whatever. And she would say to her, and begin quote, you wanted to use individual portions of eye fillet because this would allow you to include the death cap mushrooms in their beef Wellingtons, but not your own, end quote. I totally agree with her. Now, Erin said this to her, and it was very simple. Incorrect. That was it, okay? Then Nanette shows Erin the recipe from that dinner cookbook that she got, that recipe 10 eats, whatever it's called. And she said this, begin quote, on 2 occasions in the week before the meal, you bought 1.75 kilograms of sliced mushrooms from Woolworths. Where did the other kilogram of mushroom go? Okay, the recipe only asked for 700 grams of sliced mushrooms. Now, if you are like me and you're us Americans over here, you're gonna need a little bit of a conversion maybe, so I'll put it up here on the screen for you. So as you can see on the left, the mushrooms purchased, you see the difference, 3.85 pounds. Mushrooms required like half of that, right? So, I mean, do the math on that one. Now again, in response to the whole like, well, where'd the rest of them go? Erin was pretty tight-lipped on this, and all she had said was, I ate them. And then Rogers came back at her and was like, that's a lie. Now this back and forth, it goes back and forth, like pretty rapid pace from what I can gather. Now we've heard several of these points before, but it could have been just a way for like Annette Rogers to trip her up and whatnot. Let's put something on the screen, I'll read it out loud or you can read with me. So Rogers puts to Patterson, you never mentioned to the lunch guests that the beef Wellington contained dried mushrooms from an Asian grocer. Patterson, we never discussed any of the ingredients. Rogers says Patterson also never told the guests the beef Wellington contained foraged mushrooms. I didn't think they did at the time, Patterson says. So let's returneth to the fictitious Asian grocer theory or story, whatever you want to call it. So the prosecution starts off by reminding Patterson that she didn't mention the Asian grocer when she first spoke to that Dr. Chris Webster 2 days after the lunch. Rogers said, begin quote, it was only later that you mentioned the Asian grocer because you had time to come up with a story, end quote. Now, Rogers kept beating this drum about her, like, you know, the stories don't match, they don't do this, and blah, 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 blah. And she even brought up when Erin talked to the paramedic, quote, I bought dried mushrooms from an Asian grocer in Melbourne and fresh mushrooms from Woolworths, end quote. Now, all Erin had to say to this was, disagree. Now remember, she also told that health official, Sally Ann Atkinson, that she bought from an Asian grocer around like April that year, and they smelled funny, so she ended up not using them until the beef Wellington meal. Now, this is what Rogers had to say about that. Quote, if you believe the mushrooms were overpowering, you didn't worry about this in the beef Wellington dish? End quote. Now this is what Erin said to her about this, quote, I thought it was the perfect dish for them, end quote. Now Rogers also called Erin out on the inconsistency of the packaging and the weight that she described to Atkinson. I'm going to put the screenshot up here. I'll read through it for you. You can listen or read through with me. The court previously saw how Miss Atkinson had mocked up sandwich bags and labels sent to Miss Patterson in a bid to narrow down the type packaging she was describing. You gave this detailed description of the packaging, even though you could not give any detail about the store you bought the mushrooms from, Dr. Rogers said. You described the packaging in this way because you wanted it to sound like they were not commercially provided mushrooms. Miss Patterson says that's incorrect. Dr. Rogers suggests Miss Patterson lied about moving the mushrooms into a Tupperware container to mask the fact that there was never packaging for the mushrooms because the one she described as bought from an Asian grocer did not exist. Dr. Rogers then suggests during her conversations with the public health official, Ms. Patterson changed her story again. This time around the weight of the dried mushrooms, she was telling them when she bought from an Asian grocer. What did I change? Ms. Patterson asked. You changed the details of what you had previously told Sally Ann Atkinson about the weight and added more detail. Correct or incorrect? Dr. Rogers asked. I clarified. I think I made it clear at all times that I really wasn't sure, but I was trying to be helpful, Ms. Patterson says. Now, this next thing I thought was a kind of interesting way to basically remind the jury that, you know what, it's probably like next to impossible that Erin doesn't recall the specific Asian grocer that she got these from. I'll put the screenshot up here. I'll read through it. The court is shown a map of the suburbs in the Monash Council area, which includes all of the suburbs where Miss Patterson says she bought the dried mushrooms. Dr. Rogers then recaps that Miss Patterson had worked for the Monash Council and would be familiar with the suburbs and locations involved, but she says she couldn't identify the store where she bought the mushrooms. The Asian grocer story was a deliberate lie, Dr. Rogers suggests. Incorrect, Miss Patterson says. Now, Joseph Dunstan of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation noted that Erin began, quote, frequently moved to correct and clarify details in the prosecutor's questioning when she saw an ambiguity or an inaccuracy, end quote. I'm going to put this screenshot up here. We'll read through it together. You can just listen to me. During one point in the evidence, Dr. Rogers tells the court that Miss Patterson and the children would sometimes stay at an apartment in Mount Waverly. It's probably irrelevant, but it was a house, not an apartment, Miss Patterson says. Now, this is sofa speculation. This is sofa sidebar on this. This seems like the real Erin. So these like little nitpicky things that she's doing like this that keep coming up and being like well, you forgot to dot the I here. We forgot to do this. Think about how when we watch these trials and how things usually go over with the jury. Jurors don't like to see victims get blamed, people, you know, like the defense or whoever be rude to a victim, but they don't like to see it really from other people too, depending on the situation. So Erin's not in a position, in my unprofessional opinion, to get snippy, get attitude, dot I's, cross T's, this kind of a thing. And like these little quips, right? That kind of quip, like that little ting of an attitude, right? This is not the time for it. Okay, so anyways, enough of that. Then Rogers calls her out for a contradiction in her police interview. Begin quote, contrary to your account, when you claimed you've been very, very helpful to the health department as they investigated the origins of the death cap mushrooms, when in fact, you were not. You sent them on a wild goose chase trying to locate this Asian grocer. You did not want to be pressed for details about the Asian grocery store. You lied about the source of the death cap mushrooms because you knew you were guilty of deliberately poisoning your 4 relatives. You know Erin was shaking over that one, okay? She was ready to come up over that thing. You know she was ready to come up over that. So let's go back to the children. Now, Rogers brings up Erin's that whole thing where she's like hesitant to have her kids examined at the hospital and was like being super weird over it. And Erin agreed that she probably said something along the lines of, is it really necessary to bring the children to hospital because they don't have any symptoms? And I removed the mushrooms from the leftover meat, end quote. And then, y'all, it gets even more tense, okay? Then Rogers says to Erin, quote, it is not credible that if you genuinely thought that your children had eaten a potentially fatal poison, the last thing you'd be worried or stressed about was pulling them out of school. I suggest that you would have wanted them to have immediate medical attention, notwithstanding on your claim that they hadn't eaten the mushrooms. Now, 100% agree. That was, to me, a huge red flag. Now, Dr. Rogers will close the line of questioning and says, quote, "Miss Patterson, do you love your kids?" End quote. And then Erin offers this kind of bizarre answer to that. She says, "I still love them." I'm going to put this next thing on the screen. I'll read through it out loud. Dr. Rogers puts to Patterson that she's effectively saying she fed her children leftovers from Saturday's lunch on Sunday, even though she'd been experiencing diarrhea in the aftermath of the lunch. "It was the same lunch, yes," Miss Patterson says. Dr. Rogers asks if that was even though you thought you had food poisoning from the same lunch. "I didn't think that," Miss Patterson says. That's another very slippery slope, excellent point brought up there. Now, this next exchange between Rogers and Erin is next level. I'll put it up on the screen. Miss Patterson is questioned over why she served leftovers from the lunch to her children if she was aware it had made some of the lunch guests so unwell. Dr. Rogers, "I suggest that you told well over a dozen people, including your son and daughter, health professionals, child protection workers, police, and a friend, that you had fed your children the same meal you had served at lunch." Miss Patterson, "I was pretty clear that it was the meal minus the mushrooms and pastry." Dr. Rogers, "But isn't it the fact that on Sunday the 30th of July, you found out that at least Don and Gail were unwell?" Miss Patterson, "Yes, I did find out about that." Dr. Rogers, "So why did you proceed to feed the same meal to your children when you knew or suspected that the meal that you'd served had made them ill?" Miss Patterson, "I didn't know or suspect that." The court has then shown a transcript of Miss Patterson's son's interview, where he told police that Miss Patterson told him that his grandparents were unwell, and she suspected it might have been the Saturday lunch. "I think he's confused. I didn't say that to him on the Sunday, and it's not clear when he's saying that I said that to him," she says, adding that there were further conversations at hospital on the matter. Dr. Rogers says, "So is it your evidence that he's wrong about that aspect of his evidence?" Miss Patterson, "No, I don't think it's not clear from his evidence when he's saying I said that to him." I mean, the back and forth, my goodness, y'all. Now, let's go back over that cell phone data again. So like in all of these cases, we hear so much about, the different cell phone data, technical data, all this kind of stuff, right? And this case is not immune to that, right? Now, here's the thing. Some of this stuff is a little bit new if you've been following the case, day by day, whatever. So Erin will take the court down this long and winding road. And I'm going to quote her. "It looks like, yes, I did go to the locked township on the morning of May 22nd, 2023. But I disagree that I went to the reserve with the purpose of finding death cap mushrooms at a location that had recently been uploaded to the iNaturalist site." End quote. So then they go back and forth, Rogers and Erin. And Rogers is like, nope, you know what? I'm going to sit here and talk about how we've got phone data that puts you in the Altram area, where just the day before that she pinged there, that's when that fungi expert Thomas May had, quote, flagged death cap mushrooms in an iNaturalist pen. Now, Erin, of course, disagrees with this, and she's like, "I don't believe, how do I put it? I didn't go to Altram and Nielsen Street, and I don't remember going there as a destination. That's what I'm saying." End quote. Now, then when Rogers is like, "Okay, so did you maybe pass through?" And Erin's like, "Okay, yeah, maybe so, right?" Then she drops off one more bomb before their lunch break. Quote, "I suggest you blitzed up the dehydrated death cap mushrooms to a powder before putting them into the beef Wellingtons to hide them in a similar way that you've been doing to powdered mushrooms in your children's meals." And of course, Erin just simply said, "Disagree." Okay, now I'm going to put up another super cringy back and forth between them, and I'll read through it. Dr. Rogers indicates she'd like to ask the 50-year-old about foraging for edible mushrooms and suggests that Miss Patterson has made new claims to the jury about foraging. "What do you mean by new?" Miss Patterson asked. Dr. Rogers says in her police interview a week after the lunch, Miss Patterson denied foraging for mushrooms, but she since told the trial she has foraged. "I told the police that I had never foraged, but I didn't say that to the other witnesses. I said that I had not put the foraged mushrooms in the meal," Miss Patterson says. Dr. Rogers asks if she accepts that one of the 423 books in Miss Patterson's home were about foraging. Miss Patterson replies she's not gone through the several thousand books in her home to check if any are about foraging, but says some are about gardening. Dr. Rogers says she'll offer Miss Patterson a log of books in her house compiled by the police. "I've seen that log. It's not complete," Miss Patterson says. Miss Patterson says when the police searched her home on August August 5th, she hadn't unpacked all of her books onto the shelves and several were in tubs in her garage. She says over August, September, and October, she went through and put them on shelves, adding hundreds to those that were on the shelves on August 5th, 2023. Dr. Rogers asked if Patterson accepts that on August 5th, no book about mushrooms was found in her house. That'd be right, Miss Patterson responds. Dr. Rogers puts to Miss Patterson that her claim she had foraged for mushrooms was a lie she'd come up with to try and explain why you put foraged death cap mushrooms in the meal you serve up. You realized, I suggest, that your previous claim about buying mushrooms from an Asian grocer didn't fit the evidence against you. At some point, you realized the lie you told police about not foraging for wild mushrooms did not stack up, Dr. Rogers said. Ms. Patterson disagrees with those propositions. Then she digs in even deeper to Erin's lies about the gastric bypass surgery. I'll put this on the screen, we'll read through it. Rogers says that on Tuesday, she told Patterson the clinic does not offer gastric bypass. Rogers says that Patterson had been provided a statement and records that police obtained from the Enrich Clinic. Do you accept that Enrich Clinic has not and has never offered gastric bypass surgery, Rogers says? Yes, Patterson says. She also agrees the clinic has never offered a pre-surgery appointment of gastric bypass. Rogers says police obtained her medical records during the investigation. She says the records do not include weight loss treatments or referrals for one. Patterson agrees she did not receive a referral to a specialist who could perform gastric bypass surgery. I never got anything like that, Patterson says. Rogers says Patterson went to a doctor 3 days before the lunch for renewed prescriptions. She says there's no reference to gastric bypass surgery or weight loss procedures in this appointment, and Patterson agrees. Now, court would end up ending early that day in a technical issue, and like I said, we're a few days behind, so we're kind of catching up on this testimony and whatnot over here. So we'll continue forth. We're getting close to the end of this. Again, this back and forth and the this and the that and the dot your I's and cross your T's and you forgot this and I forgot this. There's little excuses for so many things. There's still, and you know, and I sit here when I say this, like, there's still no good reason for this. I mean, of course, there's not a good reason for these crimes, right? I mean, hello, that's a no-brainer, Paul. I get that. But even in the world of this, there's just some level of back and forth. And I just feel like there's some, like, emotional, and I don't even know if it's like outrage or manic episode or like, I mean, I'm not a therapist or anything like that, right? But something like that, because it just doesn't make sense still. You know, money doesn't make sense. Revenge, who knows? Okay, but like even this back and forth, you know, where, and I don't know what that saying is, but it's like where the most simplest thing is often the explanation or whatever. I feel like that could be this right here. This could simply be, I wanted to be wanted by the family and I was going to do whatever I needed to do. I didn't care about money. I had the money. I was loaning them the money, you know, or Simon did this. I wanted to get back at him. You know, what can I say? It's just all so cumbersome. The whole thing about the foraging versus getting the mushrooms at the Asian grocer, and again, that's where the whole thing gets just, you know, like what? I don't know how the mistake would happen. I feel like she's still trying to go with that, of this mix up of this or that, and maybe it did, right? One thing that you also run into is, think about when you've run into people who are, and I'm not trying to say Erin's a pathological liar here, but something of this variety where people embellish, they make stuff up or whatever, and then if something tricky really does happen to them, it's like you don't believe it. So Erin strikes me as somebody that, like, let's pretend for a second, okay, let's go out on the limb. I don't think this is what took place, but just go out on the limb. She goes to some Asian grocer, they somehow have mispicked, mispackaged, whatever, okay? These mushrooms end up in the food. Or B, she forages, she's doing her thing, she's trying to be a little Miss Nature, she gets the wrong mushrooms, accidentally cooks them in there, right? You get on that. Even if it was a mistake and all the evidence of these lies, somebody who's willing to bring family over and make up a cancer diagnosis, numerous ones over the year, right? That's major, okay? Lying about all these surgeries, this and the other. So even if it was that, it's just gonna make you look suspicious, right? So I think that Erin's probably run into something like this before. Now, I'm not trying to say like, oh, whoops, I poisoned all these people, but getting painted into a corner in this way. And I feel like that's what this was on multiple levels. Whatever emotional outburst caused her to, and I feel like, and I keep saying emotional outburst because I feel like this was done in reaction to fill in the blank, and it has something to do with the family and rejection or Simon or whatever, something. Now, it could be that she's just perfected, or she has something going on that elicits this like victim type thing in her, but really there's just evil going on, right? Like, I mean, who knows? We are still catching up with some of that last bit of testimony of Erin on the stand, so let's finish it up. So Dr. Rogers would start off the 5th day of cross-examination by showing Erin photos of mushrooms that were taken between April 23rd and May 5th, this is of 2020. Now, these pictures came from an SD card that was seized like a week after the lethal luncheon. And Dr. Rogers asked Patterson, begin quote, "Did you eat any of these mushrooms?" End quote. "Did you feed any of these mushrooms to your children, or are you unable to remember?" And then Erin says, "I cannot remember. I'm sorry." Then she takes Erin to a conversation that she had with the health department official, Sally Ann Atkinson. Now, if you recall, Sally is the one who, well, she's one of the many or whatever, but she questioned Simon, this is the estranged husband, about Erin's foraging experience. And he replied, begin quote, "It is not something I've known her to do," end quote. Now, the only thing that Erin had to say to Rogers about this is, "I cannot comment about what Simon knew." So then Rogers brings up that dehydrator again. Okay. And she brings up the time where Simon allegedly asked Erin about the dehydrator, and that whole thing that, you know, she claims he said, begin quote, "Did you use the dehydrator to poison my parents?" Now, the prosecutor also said that, quote, "I suggest Simon never accused you of using that dehydrator to poison his parents." That's just another lie to explain why the next day you disposed of it at a local tip. Now, of course, Erin's gonna be like, "No, that's not true," whatever, right? So then they change topics and they go over to the mobile phone, internet searches, iNaturalist, all the usual trappings that we've seen in this case, right? Now, Rogers will show the court a picture of Erin in the hospital on Monday after the luncheon, and then shows an image of a black backpack with a phone and a pink case that's sitting on top of it. Now, Patterson agrees that, yeah, that was her primary device. This is what's been known as phone A throughout the trial, right? Now, this was from February to August of 2023, that this was like the main device or whatever, okay? Also, remember, the police never located that phone. Now, Rogers said, now quote, "This is the phone you used to research the death cap mushrooms, as well as the iNaturalist website." Now, of course, Erin's going to reject that, and then she's like, "You know, I never saw the post about the death caps, and, you know, I don't even know what you're talking about," kind of a thing, right? Now, Erin and Rogers will go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth about the phone losing connection, all that type of stuff. I'm gonna put a screenshot up and we're gonna read it so we can get the true texture of it coming from the courtroom. You can listen to me or you can read along with me. Prosecutor Nanette Rogers shows the court Erin Patterson's call charge records. Police arrived to search Patterson's house on August 5th, 2023, a week after the lunch. At 11:48 a.m., the court hears. The records show up until 11:48 p.m. Patterson was still using what is known as phone A, but the SIM card in the phone lost connection to the network sometime between 12:01 p.m. and 1:45 p.m., the court hears. Rogers says, "It is an agreed fact in this case that this," enters the phone number, "lost connection could be due to," let's top several things, we'll go through them. "The SIM card being removed from the handset, the battery being removed without turning the handset off, or the handset being damaged in such a way that would disrupt the power of the handset or disrupt the handset's connection to the network. I suggest that you removed the SIM from phone A between 12:01 p.m. and 1:45 p.m. on August 5th. Disagree, Patterson says. I suggest that you had physical possession of the phone when you did this, Rogers says. Patterson rejects this. Rogers says Patterson removed the SIM when she was left alone to call a lawyer. Dun dun dun. Okay, let's keep going. Now, before she concludes her cross-examination of Erin, Dr. Rogers will come and she'll assert, and I'm going to quote her. She says, "You deliberately sourced death cap mushrooms in 2023. You deliberately included death cap mushrooms in the beef Wellingtons you served your lunch guest, intending to kill them. Agree or disagree?" Now, you can only imagine what she would say to that, right? So then Erin's lawyer gets to come back up, do another redirect, whatever you want to call it. So he gets up there, right? Now, he's coming up there armed with all this information. information that could possibly, maybe, we don't know, we'll see what the verdict is, tarnish the credibility of the prosecution. But is it enough to repair the damage that Erin's done with all of her misforgotten and misremembered things? Time will tell. Now, Mandy would have a big gotcha moment, okay, when he presents Erin with her medical records from the Enrich Clinic in Melbourne. Keep in mind, this is where she claimed to have this like pre-surgery appointment for that gastric bypass. And also keep in mind the last testimony the day before, whatever it was, everybody learns like, wait a minute, this clinic doesn't even offer that service. Well, the records indicated, I'm gonna quote, she'd called them twice in earlier 2023. Now he asked Erin what she knew when she contacts them, and Erin's like, I'll quote her, I was of the understanding that they offered treatments concerning weight loss, and I believed that to be gastric bypass and liposuction. Now she goes on to further claim that the pre-surgery appointment was basically like, a consultation so they can, how they do all these things, see what she needs, what she's doing, all that kind of stuff, right? So Mandy then shows the court a screenshot from the Enrich website, which reads in part, I'm going to quote it, Dr. Rich will not be offering liposuction as a treatment from July 2024. Now, Mandy's redirect ends with a question regarding the 6 smaller fillets. Now, remember, Dr. Rogers from earlier, she suggests that Erin made all of those separate ones and whatnot, and an additional one, the additional serving for Simon, her estranged husband. But when her defense attorney gets over and asks her, I'm going to quote her, she says, I bought 5 twin packs of beef eye fillets and put 2 in the freezer. Now, both sides rest. Justice Bill announces to the jury, ladies and gentlemen, this is the conclusion of the evidence in this case. Now, the parties, they commence this legal discussions in the absence of the jury, and that ends up taking quite some time, and then they come back and hey, you can go ahead and go home now. So, okay, that ended all of that, right? Now, like I said, here we are, and the closing arguments have been taking place. So it's morning time where I'm at, so basically overnight. So from people that are talking to me and everything from Australia, they're just like, oh, yeah, the prosecution has gone on for hours and hours and hours. So depending on when you're seeing this, they're either deliberating, they've either already done the stuff, or they have, they're still hanging out there. So we'll see. Okay, so opinions so far on what I have seen. And we were talking about this in the live chat, and it was kind of one of these well, Paul, what do you think or whatever? This is where I'm at. I do believe that, yes, she put these death cap mushrooms into the beef Wellingtons. I guess my thing is the intention, but I do not believe this is an accident. I do not believe she accidentally foraged, or that she, got, a bad batch from an Asian grocer like she'd have you believe. I think she absolutely 100% got the mushrooms on her own accord. I think she did exactly what they say. iNaturalist, got them, puts them in the thing. My only question is, did she want them dead, or did she want them to be sick? I think either way, the end result in it was going to be that she was a victim of circumstance, meaning, oh my gosh, look at me, I've lost my family. Almost like if you take her press conference that she did, okay, remember, and I say press conference, but before she was arrested and she was outside her house and all those reporters were there, and she's like, I love them. I love them. Imagine that situation and vibe on steroids, right? Especially if they had all died, especially if Simon was there. Keep in mind, Simon was supposed to be there. So the part that's confusing about this, and there's many parts that are confusing because murder isn't it should be confusing, the reasons why, if that makes sense. This is almost was it a revenge thing? Was it, because she basically had the money from what I understand, right? So I go back to this question though. Whether you are the only person that doesn't get severely sick at a big dinner versus a person who survives everyone at your lunch dying, either way, in my opinion, you would be like, oh wow, that's gonna make me look really suspicious. I should be in my P's and Q's. So that's where I get confused, where I'm like, what was her end goal? Did she really want them all dead? And if so, how did she think she was going to get away with it? If her end goal was to make them all sick, I feel like the evidence to me shows she knew enough about the death caps to know this is not just a stomach bug. Yeah, but I'm just like, okay, was she almost then wanting it to be like, okay, well, I've made them sick, and they'll kind of subconsciously know, don't mess with Erin. She could do whatever, you know, she's evil. You know, we did her wrong, and look what happened to us. Like that kind of martyrdom type thing or whatever, I don't know. But I just feel like she knows enough about them to know this was going to probably kill them. So it's just like, why would you do that then? You know, was it like a mental snap? Was it a mental break? Was it completely pre-plotted? Because if you go based on Dr. Wright, you know, the prosecution and all that, this has been planned out for quite some time. If you look at the timeline, you know, talking about with the phones, with, you know, planning the lunch, the line about the cancer, like all of this was adding up. And then you could also look at, you know, go down the rabbit hole of, say all this stuff is adding up and she's like kind of this emotionally unstable person. And then something goes down with Simon, because remember, he cancels last minute and that sends her over the edge, right? But I think at that point, she would have already had it planned. So I don't think it was like, I'm not going to do anything to them, and then Simon cancels, so now I'm going to kill them with this. Like, this was the dish she made took plotting, even if by just a little bit, but not like a last minute, like, let me throw some beef Wellington, you know, in the oven real quick. You know what I'm saying? Like, she clearly was already plotting this. She got the death caps before. That's the part that blows my mind. Also, the part that blows my mind is again, when you look at the kids and stuff like that, like, I just think of anyone even being willing to have that even hidden in the house. Imagine, even put yourself down the rabbit hole for a second, where it's like, I'm gonna get the best revenge on these in-laws and everybody and my ex-husband. Yeah, I'm gonna get these death caps and I'm gonna hide them. Imagine if by some chance your kid got into that and died, and you'd be like, you know what I'm saying? So it's so many questions. So many questions. So that is it. If you could, while you're in the comment section hanging out, if you could drop some old sofas down there for myself, Rosco and Spirit, Bo and Luke, and you, the most important, the Sofa Squad. That way we'll have a place to sit, hang out, talk about this case, all the other cases we do talk about here at the Sofa Squad. And until we gather around there on the old shrooms in the comment section to do that, I'll see y'all soon.
I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Rosco on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.
Hey, welcome to the Sofa Squad. Sipping from the cup that, hey, come laugh with the Sofa Squad. Can't roll my damn eyes hard enough.